Hello everyone, this is Magda, the Warsaw guide, and today the promised video, the video about the Kampinos National Park and historical places in the park. I know that you've been waiting for this one for a little longer, but it's finally here. So let's start with some basics. One of the purposes of creating the national park was protecting not only the nature and wild animals living there, but also to protect the historical places. And there are a lot of historical places in the park, starting with the 13th century medieval gourd in one part of the forest. Well, one day I'm getting there. Also, there is a wonderful church in Brochów. That church is quite known for a fact that Frederick Chopin was baptized in this church. Brochów church has extra defenses. It could serve as a refuge in case of danger, in case of the enemies attacking the area. The defenses were put up in the 16th century, but the parish established there is definitely older, at least 2 centuries older. As for more modern history, there are a lot of historical places in the park connected to the Polish history because of its proximity to Warsaw. Of course, back in the time, it wasn't, half an hour by the public transport to get to the edge of the forest, but it was close enough, maybe a day, 2 days of journey. At least in the 18th century. In the 18th century, by the end of the 18th century, we had so-called Kościuszko uprising in Poland against the Russian forces. Yes, the same Tadeusz Kościuszko, that's the national hero of the United States. Some of the partisans, rebels forces were also hiding in the forest. The same applies to another uprising. Yeah, I know Poland and uprisings. That's a very, very long story. We're rebels, aren't we? The uprising, so-called January uprising in 1863 against the Russians. Again, the forces, it was basically a very partisan uprising, so the forces were also hiding in the forest, and before it even started, some younger men and boys were hiding in the forest to avoid being taken into the Russian Tsar army. They were taken there by force. Everyone had to go for quite a long time. Of course, the Kampinos forest was also used by the army. That's this regular army and not such a regular army during the World War II, starting with the September campaign. For our forces, they were retreating to Warsaw at some point, because as you remember, first the Germans attacked us on the 1st of September 1939, and then the Russians attacked us on 17th September 1939. The military forces were retreating to Warsaw, and they were also retreating through the Kampinos forest. About 10,000 soldiers died in the forest, and because of some absolutely brave lancers, the army could get to Warsaw. The lancers broke through the German ranks. The forest is also known for places of the mass executions, unfortunately during the World War II, and right now I'll show you a little video from Palmyra, the place that's right now the cemetery, the war cemetery of most of the German victims. And right now we are in a spot that is definitely the most known when it comes to the historical places in the Kampinos Park. Cmentarz wojenny, the war cemetery, plenty of crosses as you can see, and a inscription at the gate, which translates to it's easy to talk about Poland, it's harder to work for her, it's definitely more harder to die for her, and the hardest part is to suffer for her. Why is it so? Basically, the Palmyra War Cemetery is connected to the World War II, is connected to German attempt to eradicate every resistance in Poland, every single resistance there was to make Polish people slaves. That was the attempt for German nation, for Hitler, for the Nazis. And as you may expect, the slaves don't need the leaders. They don't need the educated people. So they were lists prepared even before the war started. And then, after the occupation started, the arrests started as well. Most of the people, sportsmen, lawyers, priests, doctors, they were arrested and most of them executed in different places in Kampinos National Park. Most of the executions took place here in Palmyra, but there were also other places. After the war, the bodies from the other places were exhumed and brought to this cemetery. There were over 1,700 people that were executed in this place, and the whole Kampinos forest and the nearby places. Not all bodies have been identified, but some of them were. Well, the Germans were trying to cover the executions, but after each one, people that were living nearby the forest service were marking the graves. So well, we can see some of the names of the cross on the crosses. Some of them have NN, which means in Polish unknown, nieznany. Some people have been identified. We are just by the grave of Maciej Ratajczyk. He was the marshal of the Polish parliament. The politicians were executed as well. The tall gravestone that definitely stands out of the crosses is the gravestone of Janusz Kosociński that won the medal in the Olympic Games. As you can see, not only crosses, also maceves, sometimes with the names, sometimes without the names, and 3 crosses at the end of the cemetery commemorating everyone that died here, comparing their sacrifice to the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Basically, there are different numbers given when it comes to the number of people that are buried in Palmyra. Some sources say 1,700, other ones are saying 2,000. Well, it's really difficult to say. Some of the historians are still claiming that not all of those mass graves were found. Not all of them were marked by the forest services during the war after the executions, but they could they did whatever they could. In some of the places you can see the crosses while the bodies were already exhumed, and buried in a cemetery, like the one, like the place visible on screen right now, and also the place with another little video. A little farther from a cemetery, following the Blue Trail, you can also find the Palmyra death clearing, where two crosses mark symbolic graves of the prisoners of Pavek prison, the one that I mentioned in the video about the gallows. They were shot in this place in November 1939. Interesting fact about Palmyra is that that place used to be the ammunition warehouse before the World War II. Secret ammunition warehouses. There were all the facilities in place, the infrastructure, even the tracks that were leading to Palmyra. It was somewhere here along the photo is actually on screen. And so just by the long marshes I was talking about in the previous video about the Kampinos forest, but the Germans dismantled it all and destroyed the remains. There's also another place connected to the German people, but not from the World War II. It's connected to the German settlers that came to those lands in the beginning of the 19th century, in the when this area was a part of Prussia. After the third partition, the territory of Warsaw was incorporated to Prussia, so to Germany, and then only after the Vienna Congress it was given to Russia. But the German settlers came and they stayed. They stayed for longer than a century. And if they stayed, they needed a place to live, to learn, and to bury their dead. The settlers were brought to this place in 1818. I guess the cemetery was founded shortly after it. They lived in the area for more than a century. They had to leave in 1944 with the Red Army approaching, with the war being lost by the Germans. Not that they had much to do with the Germans, as a lot of them have accepted Polish traditions, Polish language. There's even one surviving gravestone with the Polish inscription. But for people of the German origin, very often with the German names, staying would be even more dangerous when the Russians were approaching. So they left. The cemetery was forgotten. Nobody took care of it. It fell into ruin till recently. The volunteers and the national park authorities decided to make it right, to clean the territory of the cemetery, to renovate some of the remaining gravestones. Some of them are with the inscriptions that are usually those that were laying with the inscription side to the ground, so they were preserved. It's a wonderful remain of history that was here, of people that were living here, and of that very, very difficult history of the Polish lands. The last place I want to talk about doesn't really exist anymore, but I was there. There were the atomic headquarters of the Polish army, prepared in case of the World War III, in case of the nuclear attack. They started building it in the 60s. They were still doing it in the 80s. And then the whole project was brought to a halt. Why? Well, the spying satellites. It was quite obvious that it was built there, though it was very, very well protected, underground, under the layer of sand, under the dune. There were some underground installations as well. But then in the 80s, it was abandoned. It was reclaimed by the park in 2004. Nobody used it. It was falling apart. You can see some photos that I found online. I've never been there at that time. In 2017, they were all demolished because it was quite dangerous. People kept coming there, and somebody could really hurt himself or herself while exploring all of those places. Well, I like exploring too, so I won't say anything against those people. Right now, there's only one place that's still existing, the underground chamber, and it was given to the bats. The bat, as in those nasty little ones you can't eat because otherwise it starts the worldwide pandemic. But our bats from the National Park of Kampinos Forest can be there, can sleep there during the day and leave at night. That's their shelter in the former atomic headquarters of the Polish army. And now, last but not least, a little legend from the Kampinos forest. And we're right now in a place that's called, well, it's in translation maybe called Grave Bridge. Bridge is small, as you can see. Well, not too much water either, though when it's, let's say, wet, it's a little better. It's a main stream of the Kampinos National Park. But you may want to ask me why this lovely place is called the Grave Bridge. According to the legend, there was a man, a traveler, that at night got stuck close to the forest, and he asked in the nearby mill for meal and bed. He got both. He spent the night there, and the lady of the house was going to the church on the next day. Well, she put on her best clothes, as usual when it comes to the church. She took her jewelry, whatever she could have, and she went to the church. Well, our traveler left earlier, and he trapped her. He caught her near this bridge. He killed her, he robbed her, and then he hid her body somewhere here. They say that the body was covered by the tree branches, plenty of those nearby, and according to the local tale, everyone that crosses the bridge has to pay for the passage by bringing a branch. I did. I hope that you have enjoyed our little trip to the Kampinos forest. I keep going there, so probably one day I'll post another video with some of the stories from the forest. And next time I'll probably post something about some Warsaw place. I don't know about what right now, but I guess I'll come up with something. I always do, as you could see with the video with the mural. It's sometimes it's just a moment and just a thing I see. So thank you so much for watching. Until next time.